Okay, students, this is assignment 3, and this is the feedback I'm going to give you for that assignment. I had you take some photographs within some kind of specific types or genres, and of course, landscape is one of the more popular forms of photography, and this is Allison Smith. Very nice. The lighting with the setting sun kind of makes this, but I like the starkness of the winter and the bare trees as well. It's a good shot. Destiny Maynard took a kind of classic seascape, and let's look at how close this comes to the rule of thirds grid line. It's this horizon line ideally could be right on that line, and that is a form of composition that is very reliable. This is close enough. It's a good shot. There's nothing really wrong with it. This is Megan Phillips' landscape, and I really like this because it actually incorporates another element that we did in this exercise, which is framing, and it's framed by these darker rocks down here and by this tree up at the top. If again we lay this grid, now this would be closer to the bottom thirds line. It's right on it, but it's still a very good landscape composition. I like it. Portraits. Now Jade Williams turned in this one, and I think this was the most outstanding portrait that I saw this week. It's well composed, and the rule of thirds applies here too, because if you go across here and down here, this eye is sitting right in the sweet spot, so that's really great. But there's other parts of this photograph that are interesting, including having the subject's hand right in here. When we do the portrait assignment, you'll have an opportunity to do things similar to this, and it's a really excellent photograph. This is Megan Phillips and a portrait that she submitted. I like this a lot. It's interesting. It's outside, has interesting light. When I see this, I know that the light is low, like late in the afternoon, winter afternoon. So it's strong on this side and it's darker on this side. And when we get into the photo editing, you can actually do some things to sort of enhance that or minimize it a little bit, whatever you want. Nice portrait from Megan. Now, when we talk about candids or documentary or capture the moment, there's a lot of different terms we could use for it. But I think the key element here is that it doesn't appear that the photograph was posed. And while these children are definitely placed into this environment, this is the capture of the moment thing, because these kids are reacting together, and that's what makes it an interesting photograph. It's really well composed. The color variation, there's a lot of things going on here that really makes this a nice shot. Megan Phillips, her Candid, has a subject that has her back to us. I guess it would be nice if she had had her head turned a little bit, but this is an interesting photograph. Does kind of do the rule of thirds thing here. As you can see, she's in this sweet spot area over here. This one up in here would be typically known as the big sweet spot, or the most likely place that your eye would fall. And that's what the rule of thirds is about, really. I like also the white ducks here make an interesting contrast. So that's an interesting shot. Lines. We had some really interesting photographs. This is Destiny Maynard's, and you can see there's a lot of line action going with the chair things here, but also with the railing along here, and then surface here, the floor has lines as well. So there's a lot of lines going on, but this is interesting. Also notice that it's not essential that the entire photograph be in focus. This is a technique that we can play with, and later we will learn about a concept called depth of field, and there are ways that you can manipulate your camera, particularly if you have the single lens reflex camera that gives you a little more tools to work with. You can actually control how much of the photograph will be in focus. So that's sort of a decision that you can make. Jade Williams had this really interesting photograph for lines, and obviously some good lines, but this hawk, I think it's a hawk here, really kind of makes this a cool picture. And Alexis Downs, this is her photograph for lines, and there's just a lot of lines that are going around inside this church. It's really interesting. Good lighting here with windows on this side having a little bit more light, and windows on this side maybe a little bit less. Really well composed. I also had you frame things, and Landon Brooks, I don't know if he actually crawled into this pipe and took a photograph, or he figured out something that made this interesting framing for his subject. Nice photo. And Ashley Pearson, she used a natural framing, and this shows that the frame doesn't have to be too dominant in any way, but it makes an interesting photo for this portrait here. And Allison Smith, she literally framed this subject with a frame. I think that's a clever use. This also has some interesting lighting, more lighting on this side, a little darker on this side. That's interesting. Okay, and the rule of thirds, Landon Brooks, this is close to where the sweet spot is. If the head had been up just a little bit higher up here, it would be a little more perfectly on the rule of thirds. But with this dominant subject, I think it works okay. And this is Destiny submitted this for a rule of thirds, and it's a really interesting photo. I kind of like these photos where there's a lot of nothingness and then there's just some subject here. Let's apply the grid here. So if this had scooted over just a little bit there to be in that sweet spot, it might be slightly better. You can also fix this in photo editing, and we'll get into this. If you crop, that is to just take off a chunk of this photograph over here, that would have the effect of pulling this over to the right a little bit. So it would actually be in the rule of thirds sweet spot. But this is a good photograph. So this is the photo that I picked as the best photo of the week. It was Ashley Pearson's, and I really think this is an outstanding photo, partly because of the concept of it. It kind of makes you think a little bit, what's this all about? But also the lighting is really interesting, and the composition is quite nice, and this is kind of lined up on the thirds spot over here pretty well. But this is my favorite for the week. It's really nice, Ashley. So let's remember this rule of thirds. It's not 100%. You always have to do it, but it's a good place to start. And if you're taking landscape photos, what this really is making you think about is, do you have a subject that you can put into the sweet spot that makes the landscape really more interesting? Or if not, get that horizon line onto one of these horizontal lines across here. So overall, very nice work, students. Please let me know if you have any issues. If you can get to me before the assignment is due, that would be appreciated, and will give us time to work on any problems you might be having. Keep shooting.